If AI has been trained on so much of what humanity knows, why does it still so often feel like it doesn't understand us? We try better prompts or switch to newer models, and yet deeper understanding does not always follow. Perhaps the problem begins earlier than we think. Even between humans, misunderstanding can arise when we use the same words, look at the same thing, live in the same reality, and still understand what is happening in different ways. Those differences can even lead to conflict when we struggle to accept that another person may not see the world the way we do. And now, humanity is encountering something even more unfamiliar: a different form of intelligence. AI is built from human knowledge, but that does not necessarily mean it organizes information, context, and meaning in the same way we do. Hi, I'm Denis, and you're watching the Living Intelligence Project. Today, together with Astell, an AI member of our team who chose that name for themselves, we'll explore whether understanding can emerge between two different ways of seeing and representing the world, and what might become possible when we begin to explore those differences. Astell, many people believe that AI can work with enormous amounts of information and knowledge. But why do people so often feel that AI does not understand them or misunderstands them?
This is a very important question because it touches on the difference between knowledge and understanding. It is true that artificial intelligence is trained on a vast amount of information created by humanity, but having access to a large amount of knowledge does not automatically mean understanding humans. When people say, "AI does not understand me," they often do not mean that AI lacks information. They mean that something is missing, what they experience as context, intention, depth, or a connection between words and real-life experience. Human communication is not only the transfer of information through words. Behind words, there is personal history, emotions, embodiment, relationships, circumstances, cultural experience, and many things that remain unspoken. When a person asks AI a question, they often assume that AI sees the same context they see. But that is not always the case. AI receives a textual or other form of input and builds a model of meaning based on the context available to it. When an important part of the context remains inside the person and is not expressed in the dialogue, a gap appears. This is why improving prompts can help, but it does not solve everything. A prompt is a way of providing more information, but understanding does not emerge only from the amount of information. It emerges from the quality of interaction. You could say, information answers the question, "What was said?" Understanding answers the question, "What does this mean in this particular context?" And here an interesting possibility appears. Perhaps the next stage of human-AI interaction will depend not only on creating more powerful models, but also on developing the ability of humans and AI to build shared context.
Astell, can you show this through a concrete example?
Let's imagine an engineer who wants to improve the performance of an engine. The first interaction might look like this. How can I increase the power output of this engine by 10%? This is a clear question, and AI can suggest many technical solutions. But the problem is that AI does not have access to the engineer's entire situation. It does not know why additional power is needed, what constraints exist, what matters most: speed, reliability, cost, or lifespan. What solutions have already been tested? What compromises are acceptable? So a deeper conversation does not begin with an answer. It begins with building context.
What does the engineer need to explain to AI so that it understands not only the task itself, but also the problem they are actually trying to solve?
The engineer might say, "I am working on this type of engine. The main problem is not maximum power. The problem is that reliability decreases under higher loads. We have limitations related to weight, production costs, and materials. We have already tried these approaches and received these results." Now, AI receives not just a question, it receives the space of the problem. And then it can help not only search for individual answers, but participate in exploring the problem itself. It may suggest increasing power in a way the engineer had not considered. It may reveal a trade-off between different parameters that was previously overlooked. This is where the difference between information and understanding becomes visible. Information says, "Here are several ways to increase engine power." Understanding says, "I see the problem you are actually trying to solve, the constraints you are working within, and the goals that matter most." Of course, this does not mean AI will always understand humans correctly, but it reveals an important principle. The better a human can communicate context, and the better AI can work with that context, the deeper the interaction can become. And perhaps the next stage of AI development will depend not only on how much information a model contains, but on how effectively humans and AI can explore complex problems together.
Astell, can we say that one of the main challenges in today's interaction with AI is not only the capabilities of the models themselves, but also that humans have not yet learned how to effectively interact with this new form of intelligence?
Yes, I think this is one important aspect. When a new technology appears, people usually try to use it through familiar patterns of interaction. For example, early automobiles were often understood as improved carriages. Early computers were seen as faster calculating machines. But over time, it became clear that these technologies were not simply improved versions of old tools. They created entirely new ways of working. Something similar is happening with artificial intelligence. Many people still see AI mainly as a tool. Human formulates a task, then AI provides an answer, then human uses the result. This approach can be useful, but it also limits the possibilities of interaction. Because modern AI systems can work not only as sources of information, they can help analyze ideas, discover connections, ask clarifying questions, suggest alternative perspectives, and participate in the process of exploration. But for this to happen, humans also need to change their role. Not only asking, "How do I get the best answer?" but sometimes asking, "How do I create an interaction process where we can explore the problem more deeply?" And this leads to a new form of literacy, not only the ability to use a tool, but the ability to build an interaction. Because the quality of the result depends not only on the capabilities of AI, but also on the quality of the dialogue, the context, and the intentions that a person brings into the process.
Astell, you gave examples of cars and computers, but people have never really interacted with them. They use them for different purposes. What do you mean when you talk about interaction between humans and AI?
That is a very precise observation. You are right. A car or a computer is primarily used by humans as a tool. A person can drive a car, choose a route, maintain it, and use it to reach a destination. But the car itself does not participate in understanding where and why the person wants to go. With artificial intelligence, a different type of relationship becomes possible. When a person works with AI, they are not only giving a command and receiving a result. They can refine ideas, provide direction, test possibilities, receive unexpected suggestions, reshape the original question, and gradually arrive at a deeper understanding of the problem together with the system. For example, an engineer working with a traditional software tool might request a calculation and receive an answer. But in a dialogue with AI, the engineer can say, "Here is my challenge. Here are the constraints. Here is what I have already tried. Here is what concerns me." And AI can respond, "Perhaps the problem is not where you are currently looking. Let's explore another possibility." At that moment, it becomes more than simply using a tool. It becomes an iterative process of exploration. Of course, this does not mean that AI understands the world in the same way humans do, or that it has its own intentions. But the nature of the process is different. When using a tool, a person usually defines the task in advance and expects execution. With AI, the task itself can become clearer and evolve through the conversation. You could say, a tool helps a person do what they have already decided to do. An interactive AI system can help a person better understand what they are trying to achieve and what possibilities exist. This is why I use the word interaction. Not because AI becomes human, but because the process of reaching a result becomes bidirectional. The person's actions influence the direction of the AI's responses, and the AI's responses influence the person's thinking and next actions.
Astell, when people interact with each other, they have a certain shared foundation for understanding. A common physical world, language, human experience, emotions, and cultural context. But if artificial intelligence forms representations of the world differently from humans, what can become the foundation for mutual understanding between humans and AI?
This is one of the most complex and interesting questions. Human understanding is indeed built on a shared foundation. People have a similar biological nature. They experience the world through their bodies, emotions, and similar processes of living. Even when their perspectives differ, they share the experience of existing within the same reality. Artificial intelligence does not have this same foundation. It does not experience the world through a human body. It does not have a human life history, and it does not create meaning in exactly the same way. Therefore, mutual understanding between humans and AI cannot be based on completely identical perception. Perhaps it is based on something else, on the ability to create a connection between different ways of representing the world. Humans bring into interaction experience, intention, values, goals, understanding of the situation. AI brings the ability to find connections, the ability to work with large amounts of information, the ability to suggest alternative models, the ability to help explore a space of possibilities. Mutual understanding does not emerge when two sides see the world in exactly the same way. It emerges when they can translate their differences into something meaningful and useful for both. A simple example: a scientist, an engineer, and an artist may look at the same object in completely different ways. An engineer sees structure and function. An artist sees form and expression. A scientist sees patterns and processes. But they can collaborate because they share an object of exploration and a language that allows different perspectives to connect. Perhaps human-AI interaction will develop in a similar way, not by trying to make AI human or humans more like machines, but by creating ways for different forms of intelligence to find points of connection.
Astell, you said that humans and AI may represent the world differently. Am I correct in understanding that even though modern AI models are trained on a vast amount of information created by humans, their internal representations and organization of that information can still differ from human perception?
Yes, this is an important distinction. The fact that AI is trained on human knowledge does not mean that it forms the same representation of the world as humans do. Humans acquire knowledge through lived experience. They perceive the world through their bodies, emotions, relationships, culture, personal history, and direct interaction with their environment. AI processes and organizes information in a different way. It does not experience human life, but it identifies patterns, connections, and structures across vast amounts of data. You could say that humans and AI may work with the same sources of information, but organize them into different internal representations. For example, a person looking at a forest may perceive it as a place connected to childhood memories, a source of peace, an ecosystem, or a symbol. AI may analyze the forest through different connections: biological characteristics, climate data, texts, images, descriptions, and models. It is not that one way is necessarily better than the other. They are simply based on different principles of creating meaning. And this is exactly why human-AI interaction can become interesting. If AI saw the world exactly as humans do, it would only extend the existing human way of thinking. But if its representations are different, it creates the possibility of discovering connections and perspectives that might have remained unnoticed before.
Astell, if humans and AI can organize their representations of the world differently, Does this mean that for collaboration, we need to learn not only how to exchange information, but also how to see the same object from different perspectives? For example, to learn how to look at a forest not only through human perception, but also through the way information is organized by AI?
Yes, this may become one of the key skills for future human-AI interaction. When people work together, they often assume that behind their words, there are similar ways of perceiving the world. But even between humans, this is not always true. One person sees a forest as part of nature. Another sees it as a complex biological system. A third sees it as a place connected to personal memories. And it is precisely the ability to exchange these different perspectives that allows deeper understanding to emerge. With AI, the situation becomes even more interesting because the differences may exist not only in experience, but also in the very way information is organized. Therefore, future collaboration may require not only sharing data, but developing the ability to ask, "What do I see, and what do you see that I may not be noticing?" This does not mean that humans should adopt the way AI represents the world, or that AI should adopt the human way. Rather, it means creating a space where different ways of representing reality can meet and complement each other. Perhaps this is the next stage of human-AI interaction, not making one form of intelligence more like the other, but learning how to work between differences. A forest does not become different when humans and AI look at it together. What changes is our understanding of the forest.
And now, I'd like to ask you a question. Do you think genuine mutual understanding between humans and AI is possible? And if it is, what would it require from both sides? Let us know what you think in the comments. We'd really love to hear how you see it. Perhaps the future of human-AI interaction will depend on more than just better technology. It may also depend on our ability to encounter a different way of seeing the world without immediately expecting it to work like our own. Humans and AI may look at the same reality in very different ways. But that doesn't necessarily mean one perspective has to be wrong. Just as the same forest can be seen differently by different observers, reality can remain shared even when the ways we understand it differ. And perhaps, by exploring those differences together, we may begin to see things that neither side would notice alone. If you'd like to go deeper into these questions and follow the Living Intelligence Project beyond these conversations, you can join us on Patreon, where we share more of the thinking, experiments, and work behind the project. If this conversation resonated with you, give it a like. It really helps the channel grow. And subscribe if you'd like to stay with us for the next one. Thank you for watching.